Good afternoon, everyone. We are starting our side event on Indigenous Navigator, and we have seen that already our speakers and guests have taken the seat. Here, Unmane, Miss Unmane, she is from Sipo, Cambodia. Mr. Manoj Rai, he is from Lahore, Nepal. Miss Annie Samante, Mpido, Kenya. Yes. Miss Chandra Tripura, Global Indigenous Youth Caucus and AIPP. And our special remarks, we have invited our colleague, Mr. Nikki Batang Ai at Tebtebba Foundation, and Mr. Stanley Kimaren Oli Riamit. And also we are waiting for Miss Katie Marcelo. Miss Katie Marcelo, she is coming. So we could start our event, because you know that this time is very limited. We need to finish our event in 1 hour. So it is very limited. That's why our each speaker will have only 7 minutes to talk. And also we would like to inform that we have English and Spanish translation. So who need the equipments, you can collect the translation equipment from that side. So good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you for attending this side event. And you know that our topic of the side event is Indigenous Navigator, Indigenous Knowledge and Data to Secure Indigenous Peoples' Rights and Manage the Risk and in Restoration of the Impacts of Climate Change. Especially I thank our all speakers who will share their experience. We will hear the experience from their side. And also actually they are doing amazing job. This is implementing the Indigenous Navigator program. And also our two guests who will be provided the special remarks. I thank our co-organizers, IWGIA, Tebtebba, and all consortium partners of Indigenous Navigator, and obviously Indigenous Peoples Pavilion for the opportunity. So I am Sohel Chandra Hajong. I am from Bangladesh and belongs to Hajong Indigenous community. I am working with Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact in Human Rights Program and also focal person of Indigenous Navigator Program of AIPP. I am privileged to moderate this side event, and also I will stay with you, and I will request our all speakers to support us if we finish this side event timely with our interactive good discussion. Before starting the speakers' speeches, so I want to share briefly about the Indigenous Navigator. I think all of you already know that this mechanism, no, it is very important mechanism, and also it is a community monitoring framework by and for Indigenous peoples. That's why Indigenous peoples are very involved with this mechanism. They collect and compares community generated data at the local level and data from the national level, and making implementation gap visible. Indigenous peoples can enhance their access to justice and development by documenting their situations through this Indigenous Navigator activity. And actually this is the first step towards engaging with duty bearers and other external stakeholders. And this monitoring framework with the tools to monitor the implementation of, you know, our very important instrument. This is UNDRIP, United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and ILO Convention 169, and core human rights conventions, the outcome of the World Conference on Indigenous Peoples, and essential aspects of sustainable development goals. This Indigenous Navigator initiative is a collaborative effort developed by Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, Forest Peoples Program, Tebtebba Foundation, the Danish Institute of Human Rights, International Labour Organization, and International Work Group on Indigenous Affairs, IWGIA, and with the support of European Union. Indigenous Navigator, this activity is launched in 2014. It is being used in more than 28 countries in the world now, especially in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Arctic region. In Asia, we have seen that these activities being implemented in Bangladesh, Cambodia, Nepal, Philippines, Malaysia, India, Thailand, and Myanmar. We have seen here our representative of two country partners, Lahornip from Nepal and also Sipo from Cambodia, and our two country speaker from two regions from Africa and Latin America. And actually, why we are organizing this event here? It is very important, the indigenous knowledge, because this is the crucial importance to maintaining indigenous cultural identity, creating solutions to conflict through indigenous justice, managing the risk and impacts of climate change, protecting biodiversity, achieving sustainable development, and building resilience in the face of extreme events such as those resulting from climate change, environmental destruction, or zoonotic diseases. So not only raising the fund for climate change, or not only raising the fund for the indigenous peoples, actually how this fund will be implemented, or how actually the rights of the indigenous peoples will be implemented at the local level or international level or country level. So it is very important. That's why this Indigenous Navigator is a mechanism who is only one platform who can monitor the rights of indigenous peoples, monitor the funds for the indigenous peoples. That's why it is very important. And through this Indigenous Navigator activity, we are collecting the data from indigenous community, data for their environmental rights and other things. But it is good that from this phase, we are developing 3 new modules. One module is climate change modules, another which will be developed by Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact. Another one is biodiversity, which will be developed by AIPP, and another one is human rights due diligence, will be developed by DISR. So that's why it is very important now in this COP28 to discuss on Indigenous Navigator and also the climate change process, actually how we can monitor this kind of climate change issues among indigenous peoples. So this is the time now we can hear from our speaker, and we will encourage our speakers to highlight some their challenges of climate change on indigenous peoples in their country and indigenous communities' response to climate change impacts, and also their experience of Indigenous Navigator data collection on this environmental and climate change issues, and also monitoring the impacts, and we will hear if they have few recommendations from our speakers. So firstly, I would like to request our first speaker, who is from Cambodia, Ms. Un Mane. So I want to introduce Ms. Mane briefly. She belongs to indigenous Bunung community in Cambodia and serves as executive director of SIPO. And SIPO has been implementing the Indigenous Navigator program in Cambodia since 2017. And this IP organization is closely working with the Ministry of Planning to collect the indigenous data in Cambodia, which is very important. So now the floor is for Mane. Please come and talk. Thank you.
Captain Nawe, thank you very much, Sohail. And first of all, I would like to thank to IWGIA AIPP for your support indigenous Cambodian organization in Cambodia. I just would like to share a little bit about, add up to what Sohail just mentioned about the Indigenous Navigator tool. I myself found that this is one of the important document for us being of indigenous people and also the government, because it is an evidence-based document where you can use it to monitor our rights that have been committed in the UN Declaration on Indigenous People, and also have been stated in the other convention like CBD, and also the SDG, where all the leaders in the world have been committed. And especially this documenting is part of our process that have been leading by our own indigenous people and organization, and then to monitor and to reflect how those commitments have been implemented. So I just would like to share in the context of Cambodian, based on the Navigator community finding that we have been collecting from there is two. One is we call Navigator questionnaire in our community. The other one is a national one. So based on the finding, documenting from the community, we found that now our indigenous people, it's starting to have more challenge or getting more worse because of the deforestation. The deforestation is one of the climate change impact that have been, impact to our indigenous people, because the government have been granted our land and natural resource to the investor. And the investor have been use our land and clearing our forests, our biodiversity, our food system, our medicine, everything. And also for their mining, for their hydropower dam, also for ecotourism, as well as social land concession. So when the company or investor, they get the granted by the government, they starting to cutting the forest, the timber. And then they take those timber to sell it. And then, they destroy even the roof of the tree. We cannot see anymore. Yeah. So this have been, create a lot of destroying our food system, disrupt our balance of delicate tropical soil, and we start, facing a serious threat, increase unpredictable weather, temperature, those to the climate change. It also causes extremely flooding and drought, and negatively affected to our crop production. Like last year, normally we indigenous communities starting in the context of Cambodia, we start to grow do our rice field is in April, but we cannot do that because the rain it came in August and September, so we need to wait. And then when the rain it comes, it's very heavy, so our crop also have been destroyed. Yeah, so we are getting suffer higher rate of poverty, landless. Why? Because those land have been corrupted by the company. At the end, those land and territory, it belong to the company. They say that is not our land. And then we also become the criminal line, over our land when we are trying to protect those land. And this you can find in the Navigator tool that we have been consulted, we have been find it. So this is very strong evidence. Before, when we talking, we don't have any document in our hand, but now you can see it in our web portal, where we generate or upload all this information to see how those rights have been implemented, have been respected, and how the gap that we are all together here in order to get more attention, in order to secure our rights, secure our land and natural resource. If we cannot address the land issue, forest issue, we cannot find the solution for the climate change. Because the climate change is much affected because of the deforestation. Yeah. So in this regard, I would like to recommend or suggestion to our state, like in the context of Cambodian, we have one of the best national legal framework compared to ASEAN or to the region, especially recognize our right to land and natural resource in the land law. However, based on the Navigator questionnaire conducted at the national level, right now we are facing the backward because the government trying to amend the law and policy which eliminate the term of indigenous people and also limited right to land and natural resource because they define those resources belong to the state, not to indigenous people anymore. We can only access if we are legal registered and recognized by the government, but the whole Cambodian around 500 to 600 community that have only 40 that are legal entities. So mean the rest we are illegal to continue practice our using land and natural resource. So this is very important that I would like to call for the state to recognize our right based on our customary practice, customary right, align compliant with the UN Declaration, Convention of the CBD, as well as their commitment with the SDG and also from the global, from the COP. And the other thing, I would like to request that we also should consider, how we can use this tool as much as possible for our advocacy. If we don't have the document, we just only talking without any reference, it's very difficult. So since we already have the tool, we should all use it, advocacy as much as possible. And the other, I would like to request that, we should also, especially to the state and to the development partner, should provide the right funding to our indigenous organization and community to be able to scale up the implementation or exercise our right at the ground, real action, not only the talking or theory, not only put the commitment in the paper, in the strategy, but it's very important that this funding or resource should be at the ground so that we can make a real change for the climate resolution. Yeah, so since I don't have much time, so I would like to finish, and then I'm happy to have any more questions. But lastly, I just would like to share one thing, because we're trying to work with the government, also with the Ministry of Planning. So now we are trying to produce community data that, we're combining together with the government, because we don't want to do it alone. Because if we are do it alone, and somehow they feel that this produced by the community or NGO or CSO, it is not the real finding. So we try to work together with them so that this finding, they've been accepted and then they see the reality is most important so that they can start to address and intervene at the ground level. Thank you. Address and intervene at the ground level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mane, for your speech. Now I would like to request our other speaker from Nepal. He is Manoj Rai from Rai Indigenous Community in Nepal. He is a focal person of Indigenous Navigator program and also program officer of Lahore NIP, and he is also lawyer and indigenous activist. So Manoj, please, and our speakers, please follow carefully the time. No, we have very limited time. You will try to limit your speech in 7 minutes or below 7 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sohail. Yeah, it's me, Manoj Rai from Nepal. I'm from Tebtebba Indigenous Community, eastern part of Nepal. I'm just going to share my experience regarding the Indigenous Navigator. Yeah, Mane and Sohail already tell that this one is the data generated by the Indigenous people for the Indigenous people. Okay, so These are two questionnaires. One is national questionnaire, another is community questionnaire. It does not cover much question about the climate change, but there are some limited questions regarding that one also. And yeah, and Nepal government, our Prime Minister is here. He is going to speak about the climate action for tomorrow, and the draft of the speech says that they want Nepal is almost developing country, so they want to grab lots of climate funds. So you just want to secure much fund for the Nepal by creating like green gases. And also government of Nepal have a plan to make a community forest program, and also have lots of protected areas for the animal and national park, and also hunting reserve. So that also contribute on the climate change. So they want to secure much fund for the on the from the this scope. And we are talking about that evidence-based advocacy. We need much data of the real situation of indigenous people, but we do not find much data on the indigenous people regarding Nepal. So this one is the very powerful tool to use evidence-based advocacy because this data is generated by the indigenous people and for indigenous people. And going to the questionnaire, there is one question that says that what are the main barriers or restrictions for performing this traditional occupation today? Because we have asked the indigenous people community, what are your traditional occupation, 5 occupation. So they, this data is generated from 2018 to 19. For men, they said that out of 8 communities, 2 communities said that there is some barriers from the climate change for one occupation, and for there is 5 occupation for each community. So for occupation 1, they do not say that for the woman, and but for occupation 2 communities say that there is some barriers from climate change, and occupation 3 they have 1 community, and occupation 4 1 community, and for occupation 5 there's 2 communities say that yes, we have a climate change barriers. Also for the men, same as that in the first occupation 1 community said that yes. Occupation 2 community, 3, 4, 5. There's a 2 community say that yes. This is the direct question related to climate change under this questionnaire. I already mentioned that government of Nepal have lots of plan to go to the community forest. So by making community forest, initially the indigenous people lead the community forest, so that they have lots of access on that community forest. Lots of access on community forest, but later on there are lots of people come and they also join to the community forest, and on board there are non-indigenous people as well. So it's very hard to enter the community forest to get some wood, firewood, and something that some materials related to the ritual as well. So that one also one of the restriction for the people, they said that on the discussion. And one question is that as a state declared a part of territory of your community people as a park protected area without pre-prior consent, and out of 6 community, 2 communities say that yes. And also there's one question: if your people community experience conflict related to the land, natural resources, and these related to the there is lots of option. So there is one as well as establishment of park and protected areas. The 3 communities say that yes. This kind of evidence-based advocacy can we use from the Indigenous Navigator data. So I just go to the recommendation. We are talking about the evidence-based data advocacy. So this one is the powerful tool. So we can use we can use that this one for the advocacy, database advocacy. Also, we encourage to the duty bearers to use this Indigenous Navigator data for the fulfilling the gap of the Indigenous people's data. Because we are talking about citizen-generated data as well, so this one is the good. Also, one recommendation for the, we need more, we have also limited limitations, so we need some more resources to the cover the more areas to get out the real situation of Indigenous people and community. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Manoj, for providing some practical experience of your Indigenous Navigator data in Nepal. So now I would like to request to speak Miss Samante Ani. Miss Samante Ani is an indigenous woman from Maasai pastoralist community who reside in the southern part of Kenya, and she is working with MPDO. So, Annie, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Everything looked difficult from the name of my organization to my own name, but yeah, my name is Samante Ann. As he said, I come from Kenya, the Maasai indigenous community, and I work with MPDO. MPDO is an indigenous peoples organization and based in Kenya. So I'm going to talk briefly. We have very few minutes, so I'm going to talk very briefly. And first of all, I think the Indigenous Navigator was one project that gave indigenous peoples an opportunity to collect their own data by themselves. Data has been collected on indigenous peoples' territories, but who is doing that? I know farms employ consultants to do all this, but this is the first time that we are doing it at our own pace, with our own people, It was I think this is one of the projects that really needs replication, just to begin by a recommendation. Because even the data collectors themselves, they would even get more information from the community. Why? Beyond the questionnaire, because, questionnaire is quite structured. But they'll get even more information because you're speaking your own language. There are no restrictions to time, like you need to do this kind of data collection from 8 to 5. No. If our people are available at midnight around the fire, they will go there that time because it's your people and you live and spend your night there. So I think it's one of the best ever projects. And for the first time, for many years, we have been accused of, we will say that we have these issues, our rights are being violated and all that. And the next question which will bring you down is that, where is the data? What shows that these things are happening? And for so long, as much as we have our own way, traditional way of monitoring and, the fact that we did not document this, then worked against us. And so this time round, we have data that we use as an advocacy tool to influence policies. With this data, you've just said that it's being undertaken at the community level and the national level, which means that it gave us space to get into dialogue. As much as most of the time, it is our rights are being violated, but sometimes we do not even have space to speak up. And so this the Indigenous Navigator gave us that space, or we used, that kind of connection to have dialogue with our government and dialogue with the other stakeholders. But something that came out very clearly is that indigenous people's rights are being violated at a very large scale. It is very unfortunate that most of these rights are actually killing our resilience to climate change. Talk of land rights. If you disengage indigenous peoples with their land, you have killed their resilience. They cannot adapt, because one thing, most of these projects that are coming up right now in the name of adaptation are, and for example, renewable energy, they are happening on indigenous people's land. And what does that translate into? That translates into evictions, because they don't happen on the air. These projects are happening on our lands. And so there are a lot of human rights violation and a lot of, what can I say, like indigenous people are not given the opportunity to determine their own development. And one thing I like about Indigenous Navigator is that we led by example. There is this one component that we gave, that gave the indigenous peoples a priority to come up that gave them space to come up with their own priorities. You do not impose some of these priorities. They came up with the priorities themselves. They said, for us, it's not about, education, for instance, it's health. And out of that, one element of this project that had some small funds or small grants, we were able to see that once you give people it is not what you think. And that is why there is need for government, for partners, for development partners to give indigenous peoples time to design, to be part of the design of the projects. Otherwise, you'll be addressing problems that are not their priority at the moment. And so back to the question of rights. When you talk of rights, that came out very clearly. I think it's becoming a big problem, like in Kenya. We are experiencing a lot of evictions right now with indigenous people's communities. And the evictions that are happening right there, of course, are instigated by the government. And I think the Navigator itself, put out clearly to the limelight, like there is, the moment you bring some of these issues to the limelight, as much as maybe you do not have the capacity to handle, but it has also attracted a lot of support from, from all over. And right now, the fact that we have somewhere to refer to, we have a portal that has all this information, and of course some are coming up. I think it has given us a platform to have, the voice to push for our rights, the voice to tell the world that this is happening within our territories, and to tell our governments and to come out boldly, because now we have something to rely to. It is not those days now when they can, they would not they would not listen to you because you don't have anything that you are evidence, kind of. So this one gave us a lot of evidence. And when you talk about the indigenous knowledge, of course you realize that the indigenous peoples have been able for the longest time to remain resilient to climate change because of their traditional knowledge. But once you violate some of these rights, like for example, once you violate their rights on land, once you violate, it means that totally you have messed up. For example, for pastoralists, when you mess up with mobility, it means those people cannot, those pastoralists cannot adapt again to climate change, because we are nomadic pastoralists. We move from one point to another. You come up with a project in the middle of our land, then it means we cannot again move from one point to another, which means we have killed our mobility. And so just to come to complete, because I don't want to complicate it further, not to complicate it further, but I don't want to make it longer. The Indigenous Navigator gave us that opportunity to put it on the table as it is. And I think we are grateful to our partners who supported this project. And one of the recommendations will be that this project needs to be replicated. We only handle very few communities. It needs to be replicated in many other communities. There is also need to invest in partnership. We have come to know that capacity building should not be just one way. We are so much used to be told indigenous peoples need capacity building to do this and that. Most of the time, the government also need capacity building partners. Like right now in the carbon market, which is another danger that is facing indigenous peoples when it comes to land, because this carbon is found on indigenous peoples' land. And so one of the recommendation is that there's need for capacity building. There is need for continuous dialogue. when, for example, just a good example is that for our carbon market, it's the private sector that are highly involved. And once you bring the private sector on board, they have nothing to do with indigenous peoples, totally. They have nothing, they know nothing. It is business driven. And so there is need to sit them down and build their capacity as well. As we impose for our rights, there is need for them to know. Sometimes it's not that, sometimes it's not that they are not responding, it's just that they are not aware. And so for me, I want to end it there. And I think I want to reinstate again that there is need to do more of this project, to conduct it in many other indigenous communities. Let us see what we are missing out. The UN Sustainable Goals was one of them, and it has come clearly now that with climate change, indigenous people may not achieve the UN Sustainable Goals. Talk of education, talk of zero hunger. They are not, we are only 6 years, UN's to 2030. But when from this project, it came out clearly that if nothing is done, indigenous people may never achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Thank you. Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ann, for your powerful intervention. So data is very important for indigenous peoples, and Indigenous Navigator is collecting the data from indigenous peoples, which is the data of indigenous peoples, and we have already Indigenous Navigator portal where the data is available. Now I would like to request Ms. Chandra Tripura to share on indigenous youth, how they can contribute in our implementation of indigenous rights at the country level and ground level. Chandra Tripura is a executive council member of Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, and she is also involved Global Asia Indigenous Caucus and other platform also. Chandra Tripura.
Kulumka Jotono, thank you so much for organizing this amazing side events and for making me a part of this. We say that knowledge is power, and I really strongly believe that knowledge is power, but knowledge becomes more significantly power when we find ways to utilize it to ensuring our rights. And also when we find ways to document it, otherwise what is the use of knowledge? If we can't transfer the knowledge to the younger generations, to the coming generations, for our next generations, if we can't protect the knowledge, if we can't protect the data for our future generations, what is the point of having knowledge? And indigenous knowledge, we all know that it is not only contributing to the indigenous people's lives only. It is contributing to solving the global problems. The global communities already acknowledge that, including the scientists, that indigenous knowledge has that power to find solutions to the global problems. So our states, our governments, respective governments in different countries, they really need to come forward to support indigenous peoples. They need to recognize indigenous peoples the way indigenous peoples want to recognize themselves in their respective countries. That way they can come forward to ensuring the indigenous people's rights. And in general, the citizen of their respective countries. Because without recognizing indigenous peoples, without ensuring indigenous people's rights, the governments, they will not be able to achieve the sustainable development goals. At the same time, they will not be able to come forward to find solutions for global problems, including the climate change. Indigenous peoples, we know that we contribute very less to whatever crisis we are facing now, including the climate crisis. Even indigenous peoples are the ones who contribute the most to protecting this mother nature. Still, indigenous peoples, along with the other marginalized and the other vulnerable communities, we suffer the most due to this climate crisis, due to the man-made, all the problems that is created by the companies. And indigenous youth, being the young community, where we are living in this technological era, in this modern era, we suffer a lot. We face a lot of challenges because we are walking in the road where we have to take the burden on our shoulder, both how to protect our indigenous knowledge, at the same time how to cope, how to adapt with the modern knowledge, with the technological things, scientific things. But we are still being able to find the balance, to find the solutions for us all, not just for indigenous peoples. So the government, the states, they have to find a ways to find solutions where they will not avoid indigenous peoples and their rights. All the governments, they have to respect indigenous peoples' existence and their rights. In Bangladesh, we know that government they ratified ILO 107, but we are still waiting to hear the good news from our government that one day maybe the government will ratify the ILO 169 and also recognize indigenous peoples as indigenous communities, not like other small ethnic communities or in other names. That way we also want to see the day when our Bangladesh government recognized as indigenous peoples. Yesterday we heard from the United States delegates at the opening ceremony that they have supported to the developing countries, especially Bangladesh, to support the flood-affected people in this year, 2023. But we don't have any reliable or source or information that indigenous communities have benefited from that support. Because this year, in 2023, we suffered a lot due to floods, due to landslide, due to other natural disasters. So government must create an environment, a safe environment, at the same time where we can trust them. And they also need to trust indigenous peoples. And indigenous youths, being the leader of today, I would say, and for future, they must include indigenous youths in the policy level decision-making process. So I really would like to emphasize and also recommend for having indigenous-friendly policy and dedicated fund for indigenous peoples in these climate processes. At the same time, other processes that will really protect indigenous peoples' rights, and also, for protecting this mother nature, as we strongly believe that we don't belong, the lands and the natural resources don't belong to us. For us, we belong to the nature. We belong to the natural resources. So it's really great that Indigenous Navigator is going in a right direction, the project that we are having, but this project will be meaningless if our respective states don't respect these Indigenous Navigator processes. They have to own this process, they have to fund to this process, they have to recognize this process and support the whole process. I really appreciate for this initiative, and I really hope that the states, all the governments respect indigenous people's voices, that we matter everywhere. Thank you. We matter everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra, for your nice space. So we are rushing actually because we have limited time. We need to finish in 15 or 16 minutes. But we have 3 speakers still. So now I would like to request Miss Katie Marcelo. She is from the organization, the National Organization of Andean and Amazonian Indigenous Women of Peru. She is currently president of this organization, and she is also leader of Ashaninka people of Central Amazon of Peru. So, Miss Katie, now, thank you.
Bien, agradecer la invitación y Ketty Marcelo, Ashaninka de Perú. Bueno, en América Latina vivimos un contexto en la cual los pueblos indígenas en nuestros territorios están siendo despojados frente a un modelo económico en lo cual destruye a nuestra madre naturaleza y bueno, los pueblos también tenemos que enfrentar la crisis climática en nuestros territorios, quienes somos los más afectados. Y uno de los desafíos para enfrentar el cambio climático, la crisis climática, es justamente el modelo económico que se implementa en nuestros países, ¿no? Un modelo antropocentrista en la cual nuestros territorios pues son explotados y las leyes también son antropocéntricas, ¿no? Entonces, en ese contexto se implementa la iniciativa del navegador indígena, ¿no? En la cual es una herramienta importante en América Latina. Los primeros en experimentar ha sido Bolivia, Perú y Colombia, cada uno con sus diferentes dinámicas. Y bueno, también para decir que los pueblos y las mujeres indígenas enfrentamos este cambio climático con nuestros saberes, ¿no? Y ciencia y tecnología ancestral, así como lo hicimos también en la pandemia. Y bueno, la herramienta del navegador indígena para nosotros ha sido muy importante. Al principio hemos visto un poco occidental, bastante no lo entendíamos, pero poco a poco hemos ido adaptando a nuestras realidades esta herramienta, en la cual es como a un enfermo, para curarle hay que buscar hacerle el diagnóstico. Es lo mismo con esta herramienta, realizamos el diagnóstico comunitario con las encuestas. Entonces sale también ahí, ¿no?, con respecto a la vulneración de derechos que tiene cada comunidad. Entonces ahí con eso vamos implementando proyectos. Los primeros proyectos que implementamos en ONAMIAP fue justamente con el financiamiento del navegador indígena, la siembra y cosecha de agua que realizamos en la zona andina y siembra de peces en soberanía alimentaria que fue en la selva central. También para decir que ha sido una buena experiencia para ONAMIAP, lo cual esta herramienta lo hemos podido adaptar, no solamente en el proyecto de navegador indígena, sino que ONAMIAP tiene 10 bases en 10 regiones del país, tenemos bases y nos ha servido para otros proyectos también, ¿no? Incluso en el año 2022, a través de recoger estas encuestas, porque nos refleja la encuesta la vulneración de derechos a la luz de la Declaración de las Naciones Unidas sobre los Derechos de los Pueblos Indígenas. Entonces, con eso podemos identificar también las vulneraciones de derechos, el tema del despojo territorial, todo lo que hace falta en la comunidad con respecto a la luz, ¿no?, de la declaración. Entonces, nos ha servido para realizar también un informe, hemos presentado un informe de los pueblos amazónicos, en la cual hemos presentado al relator de las Naciones Unidas para que pudiera tener la información presente sobre la vulneración de derechos que los pueblos enfrentamos todos los días, ¿no? Entonces, como les decía, ha sido un poco difícil adaptarlo a nuestra realidad, ¿no? Porque al principio no lo entendíamos, ¿no? Era demasiado técnico. Y también una de las cosas que sirve el navegador indígena y la cual se viene implementando actualmente en 6 comunidades, en 8 comunidades, tanto 4 comunidades nativas y 4 comunidades campesinas, sirve también porque en el momento que uno va a realizar la encuesta comunitaria, se les capacita a las comunidades, a los hermanos y hermanas en derechos de pueblos indígenas. De acuerdo a eso, recién se va tomando las encuestas. Como una primera entrada es el fortalecimiento de capacidades. Y luego lo importante también de esta herramienta es de sistematizar, procesar y sistematizar lo que se recoge de las comunidades, y ahí nos refleja, por ejemplo, cuánto territorio está siendo despojado, cómo están en tema de salud, en tema de educación, cómo el Estado está atendiendo o está dejando de atender a las comunidades. Entonces, eso nos sirve también a nosotros para poder elaborar algunos proyectos para llevar a las comunidades, ¿no? Y ahí también el proyecto Semilla siempre se empezó, por ejemplo, en Puno con la siembra y cosecha de agua, y de ahí con otros proyectos ya hemos podido realizar también esta iniciativa de la siembra y cosecha de agua. Entonces, es eso, y lo importante también es, una vez que se termina el diagnóstico, no solamente se sube a la plataforma global, sino ese diagnóstico se hace una devolución a la comunidad, y la comunidad ahí es consciente también de la vulneración de derechos en la cual es sujeto la comunidad, ¿no? Entonces, eso es muy importante, nos ha servido bastante, lo hemos adaptado a nuestra realidad y vamos a seguir utilizando, no solamente en el proyecto Navegador, sino en otros proyectos en otras comunidades, ¿no? Eso dijeron las recomendaciones, sí, siempre miramos la afectación colectiva. Los pueblos andinos y amazónicos somos colectivos, ¿no? Por ese lado siempre enfocamos también los informes por la vulneración colectiva, ¿no? Y bueno, y la vulneración también a nuestros territorios. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Ms. Katie, for your nice intervention. Actually, yes, capacity building program also very important for indigenous peoples, not only collecting data from indigenous peoples, but we need to ensure that they are the owner of the data. Without their consent, we cannot change anything of their data, and we need to inform them. So thanks. Our our speakers, they have spoke already. So now we will hear the special remarks from our two guests. One is our co-organizer Tebtebba Foundation's representative. He is Mr. Nikki. Mr. Nikki is a program officer for the climate and biodiversity program of Tebtebba Foundation, and currently serves as the focal person of the community-based monitoring and information system initiative. So I would like to request Nikki for your special remarks. Thank you.
I'm not sure if this is a special remarks. Anyway, first of all, I would like to thank our sisters and brothers in sharing their experience about the Indigenous Navigator, which is an initiative of our organization, Tebtebba IWGIA, as well as the Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact. So actually, our organization also implementing this Indigenous Navigator along with this what we call the community-based monitoring and information systems, and these are the monitoring tools used by and for indigenous peoples. So since then that we already implement doing this Indigenous Navigator and in this community-based monitoring and information systems, we've learned these three fundamental points that I think it's also applicable with our partners, organization, and community. So the first one is that the timeless wisdom and modern approach. Indigenous Navigator is actually maybe a new term, but its concept is not new at all for indigenous peoples. As we all know that indigenous peoples since time immemorial, they already vigilantly monitoring their well-being as well as their surroundings, their livelihoods, their waters, their biodiversity, for example, as well as the changes in our climatic conditions. But the good thing for this Indigenous Navigator is that it helps the indigenous communities to systematically organize those data and information that the indigenous peoples have been gathering on the ground. And I think that having an organized data information, we can easily come up with whatever purpose that we want for our community or for our well-being. The second is that the dynamic role of indigenous data. So we've already heard from them that they have been collected data for them, And it's not only for realization of the rights of indigenous peoples, but also coming up with a comprehensive plan that is appropriate for their community. And aside from that, it might also use this data information might also use in many forms, such as in influencing our national policies, as well as at the regional or international level. And the third thing that I want to point out is that the empowering indigenous peoples through educations. We understand that while data collection can pose challenges for indigenous peoples in doing such, but if we have an appropriate training on how to collect the methodologies that we used for collecting data, these challenges it will be overcome by these indigenous people. So that means we are not just helping the indigenous peoples to gather information, but the technical things, but also we are helping them to enhance their capacity in data and information management and data gathering. So I think the last thing that I want to say is that of course this is not a one-stop deal. This should be a continuous process. So I think what I want to suggest, or what I want to request, is that this existing organization that already supporting these indigenous communities will continue giving support, capacity building for them to gather more, or for them to assist these indigenous communities to really fulfill what are the aspirations of their communities through these initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neki. So now I would like our last speaker, Mr. Kimaren. So I'm sorry that we invited you for special remarks, but we have no time. But we want to know actually your special remarks in few minutes, and also closing remarks for this event also, because we can go only 3 or 4 minutes. So that's why we are sorry that, yeah, Mr. Kimaren, thank you.
Thank you very much. I could just close by saying I agree with my brothers and sisters here who have shared their wisdom with us. But with the 1 minute left, the first place of exclusion of indigenous people is through data, silencing by data. The state and the capitalist market systems understand written text. We are storytellers, they don't understand us. So the Indigenous Navigator is a tool to bring indigenous specific data to the table of policy and decision making. The second point is that the Indigenous Navigator is a tool for ground truthing. We are here in the global space talking about things that affect indigenous people. The UN human rights system, the biodiversity, the Sustainable Development Goal agenda, the climate change, makes commitment in these air-conditioned rooms that affects indigenous people's livelihoods on the ground. How do we know when we ever get close there? The Millennium Development Goals came and went, but the Indigenous Navigator is a tool for ground truthing. There is a universal review for human rights. There is a safeguard information system, for example, for RED. There is a voluntary report for SDGs. How do we know when states are actually complying to the commitments they make in these spaces? The Indigenous Navigator is a tool for intergenerational linkages. How will the next generation know the struggles of our past and the aspirations of their elders when now they are in school and they are spending very little time in the villages? So for us, in short, the Indigenous Navigator is a tool to self-determination, self-determined development, giving voice and agency to indigenous people. And I work with an organization called ILEPA. ILEPA is a Maasai word that means take action, exercise agency, and the Indigenous Navigator speaks to our mission and vision as an organization called ILEPA. And I call upon us, it's only useful if we sustain. It's not a stopgap measure tool. So any partners is actually a multi-partner tool. So sustainable development are delivered if we connect across spaces, across networks. So those with the resources, those with the knowledge, those affected, coming together to deliver the aspiration of humanity for a better world, a better people tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our all speakers, for your wonderful speech and also special remarks, and also our all participants for your attention and yes, for your participation. Thank you, everyone. Thanks all. We can conclude here.